Hi, I'm Dr. Cindy Dupuy. I have a PhD in learning disabilities. I do diagnostic assessments, a little bit of advocacy, a little bit of intervention. I'm also an adult with dyslexia and dysgraphia.
Hi, my name is Kim Sharman. I work with kids with dyslexia and dysgraphia and ADHD for the last 15 years, and I'm a remediation specialist.
Excellent. All right, now we're excited because we put up a video last night and somebody said, how do you explain why a student would perform better on a pseudo word or nonsense word decoding than a real word decoding, right? And they specifically referenced a test called the KTEA, the Kaufman Test of Educational Achievement.
Mhm.
Okay. And it's a test I use all the time. It is hands down, well, I think it's neck and neck with the Gray Aura reading and the KTA are like my favorite go-to tests.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes. I think it does an excellent job at really kind of pulling apart a lot of different academics and creating a fairly accurate picture of what I see often happening with students. I
Hmm.
love the way the written language scores way more than on the Wyatt or the Towel. I mean, there's a whole bunch of reasons that I love it. So let's start with Kim, because I asked you to do an activity. Do you remember the activity I asked you to do around this particular test?
Yes.
What was the activity I asked you to do?
You asked me to create a variation of simple to extremely complex nonsense words.
Yes. And the idea being, when I write diagnostic reports, I actually come in and say, hey, the kid was shown a word like this, and here's how they read it. So you've got a sense of some of the nonsense words on this because I gave you that great fun activity that you are all excited about, which I think makes you very, very sick, but very lovely.
It's
And
fun.
there's nobody else in the world that I would rather have doing it than you. So let's talk about the difference between the two tasks. So on the letter word ID task, they simply, I'm going to apologize up front. I'm just going to do this rough on the board, which we all know is fun with my dysgraphia. They literally give you a pretty basic list of words. So you would get something like goat,
Oh, so these are the real
real
words.
words. Yeah. So this is on letter word ID.
What grade is it, grade level based, or is it just it goes
Well, it starts off with really simple, super simple words, and then it progresses. So you would get goat. You might get I have another word. I have a new game over here that's triggering me. If you can see it, it says mountain goat. But you could have secret,
so two syllable, one syllable, two syllable.
just a huge range. You could have permission.
Okay, so all the way up to complex Latin.
Right. So it's
Okay.
going to start off super easy, and you might, for let's at a beginning word, you might have a word like cub. Okay.
Okay.
Start off really simple and
Mhm.
move to way more complex as you go along, and they end up in some pretty obscure words. Okay. Words that many people are unfamiliar with or don't use very often. That is kind of standard. Now, then we have the nonsense word.
And you aren't using the real ones, you're making
No.
up.
And the nonsense words follow a similar progression. That would be cub, not cut, hole, or whatever. But they follow a similar progression where they might have something like oh, fop, or they might go into
Leg or
yes, keep going. Give me some more complex.
um
Give me a
uh
nonsense,
fly pop.
and so on. Okay, so what's the difference between the two tasks?
Well, with the nonsense words, because the kid has never seen them before, they cannot be memorized. So they're sounding out each phoneme in each one of those words and then saying the word together, combining all the phonemes together.
Ideally, that's what's supposed to happen, right?
Mhm.
Ideally, a kid will try and sound it out. We have lots of kids who don't sound things out and they just jump in and they may get a handful of them right.
Right.
What's different with the letter word ID task? Because you already kind of tapped into it a little bit.
Well, I think the way schools are teaching, they have been for the last 20 years, is they're teaching kids oftentimes to memorize words. So they're memorizing the picture of the word. That's why the kid is getting some of the more complex. They can get maybe maybe they're not recognized some of these complex patterns in the letter word, but they can sound out perhaps the easier nonsense words. It's
Okay,
called orthographic memory, is the ability to memorize the picture of the entire word.
good. So you're kind of going where I was going, but I'm gonna add another dimension to it.
Okay.
So yes, we can have kids that are trying to sound out a little bit more. It's an unfamiliar word. They slow themselves down. They look at the word more, and then they actually try and sound it out a little bit more. They look at real words. They then guess at them,
Yes.
and they look at the beginning and the ending or just the start of the word, and they guess at the word without really doing a full exam of it. And so this is kind of the key point, is to then go in and analyze the kind of errors that the student made on the test.
Mhm.
Okay, that is tricky. That is tricky because typically clinicians don't always write down what errors actually occurred. And you don't always have access to the test. Even if you do have access to the test and they're just simply circling if it's a 0 or a 1, right? Yes, they got that one right.
Oh, they're not saying what the you always put the what they're not saying what the word they said was.
So when I do this test, when I do any reading test, when I do any oral language test, when I do any test that requires a significant oral response that then the quality of the response would affect the scoring, I record the response. I just do. I can't keep up with my dyslexia and my dysgraphia. I write as fast as I can. Sometimes I can't read my handwriting, but I can go back and replay it. So I go in and do this kind of analysis to find out what mistakes a student made and why. And so that's kind of the trick of it. So if you were a parent, what would you then do?
So if you were a parent, you would want to write, you would want to look at the ones he missed and compare them. I mean, for you and I, it would be easy to look at the ones they remembered, that were that had become sight words, and then versus the ones they were sounding out, like the bipop versus the secret. If they had memorized the word secret, they may get it, but they might not have gotten bipop, and vice versa.
So the thing that I would tell a parent to do, and I think we've talked about this, there is it's a book that anybody can buy on Amazon. It's called the QRI. It's called the Qualitative Reading Inventory. So you could buy a QRI, and in the QRI, they have columns of word lists. Have you seen that in the past?
Wow, that's not what I use. The QRI is to test all the reading.
Right. It tests oral reading fluency,
Uh-huh.
but it will help you figure out what passage you should start a kid on
Oh,
based on how well they can read the particular sight words. So I am going to quickly.
can we clarify for people what sight words are? Because it's
Sure.
a little confusing. So there's sight words called dolch words or fry words, and they're by grade level. And you can, again, look those up on the internet and get a list of them. And they tend to go with supposedly the level of reading that someone would be doing at that age for that grade. Again,
Right.
that could be different for all kids.
Right.
But
So,
the other issue is when you have a word that maybe they've seen over and over again, like, I don't know, baseball.
mhm.
Even though they would not maybe know how to decode that word, they've memorized the picture of that word so well that it becomes a sight word. And so they're not really reading it, they're remembering the picture of it and saying it.
Now, ironically, when I pull up this piece of the QRI, and I'm not going to show the entire page because I don't want to violate copyright issues.
Oh, I did not look at this. Okay.
So they actually have a miscue analysis sheet on it to help you think about why a mistake was made. And so that's something similar that I do when I sit down and do a diagnostic test. If I see a student read the word, oh, what's a good light bulb?
Okay. Okay, a compound word.
Okay. So if I have a kid read it as nightlight or
Right.
light, oh, what's another word that goes with light? What's another word that goes with light? Lightning.
Lightning. Yeah, that's
Okay.
perfect.
So if I saw a kid read light bulb as lightning, I would
Or
say
light, that actually, that's lighting.
yes.
If you added another N in there, and
Yes.
that's actually a perfect example of, yes, there you go.
Okay. Always trust a dyslexic not to spell it correctly.
Okay.
So if they guessed light bulb as lightning, that tells me they're looking at the beginning of the word and they're guessing.
Yes.
They're guessing the first word that came to them. Okay.
Yes.
So that's not attending to the overall structure of the word, right? What's another way that a student might read this would be like, if they read it as lig hit bulb,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. What does
Okay.
that tell us? A lot.
Go ahead. What does it tell us, Kim?
What it tells us is that the welded letter sound of IGH, making the sound IGI, has not been taught to the child. So the child is trying to literally sound out, GHT by splitting it up into different syllables. And they added an I in between hit. So, and just so you know, parents, it's not always the child's fault because guessing has been a strategy that teachers have been teaching, guessing words. It's not the science of reading, it's the science of guessing. So it's not the science, but it's really silly. And that is why you're also seeing kids making these mistakes too.
Okay. So to me, that's more phonetic,
Yes.
right? Like you haven't taught the phonology, you haven't taught the syllable types, you haven't taught the letter combinations. So this to me signals a student hasn't gone through the tenets of structured literacy the way they should to
Right.
really know how to decode a word. Okay. What if they just read it as light?
It could mean that's the first thing they recognized and they lost, with sometimes even with kids with ADHD too, they'll just hit the first part of the word they see and then forget the rest.
Yeah.
Kids
That's
do
the
that
one
all the
I was
time.
going to come up to is impulsive. I
Yes.
recognize it. I'm going to throw it out and I'm going to move on.
Yes.
Right.
And I see 8th graders doing this guessing game. I mean,
Yes. I see high school students doing this guessing game.
yes.
We know
Yeah.
of more than a few that we've shared that have done this guessing game.
Yes.
So we talked about the QRI. There's lots of places that you could go. And we've talked about, what are tools for teachers out there, but you could also get a word book that has got just a huge list of words that you could assess what your student knows based on particular patterns. You could go to, if you own the Wilson Reading System, it has an excellent tool that I absolutely love. It's called the Wade.
Very good.
I use it all the time when I'm doing an informal assessment on a student. I love the Wilson system. I think it does a great job for individuals who are wanting to do the instruction, but maybe need real help planning lessons. So again, the nice thing about the weight is it gives you a set of real words in a particular phonetic sequence, right? Like we're doing single syllable, closed syllable type, moving all the way to the more advanced, and then they have nonsense words. And so you can actually look and say, this is the lesson that they've missed, right? Let's go back and reteach that. Okay.
I have gone into IEP meetings or post IEP meetings, and I have actually the IEP meetings with my list of weighed all the phonemes and all the phonetics. And I've shown them, this kid is now in 6th grade and he doesn't know 40 of these.
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to do about it? So this, as a parent, this really wakes up your eyes as to why your child is having trouble reading. And you can do that. You can read the instructions and you can do this.
It's not rocket science.
No, it's not. And the schools, it would be helpful if all schools did this, but you're going to have to do it yourself.
So let's even go lower tech. Now, there's something out there called Teachers Pay Teachers. I'm going to caution people on that particular vehicle, because then you just have a teacher who may or may not have the same background on the understanding of structured literacy generating word lists, right? So you'll end up with spelling words that combine a ton of different rules and they're not in the standard progression, or what they view as a particular reading level, somebody else would view as a very different level. I literally had this case today where I showed a teacher that when I pulled up the gray oral reading test and had her listen to the student read aloud, she's like, oh my gosh, that's not what I hear when I have her do oral fluency with me. And I'm like, where are you getting your reading passages, right? So carefully generate a list. There's scope and sequence documents out there that give you a sense of the progression. Find your word lists that follow kind of that logical progression. Go back in and actually sit down and say, what kind of errors is the student making and what might they need? We can be impulsive. We can have orthographic processing issues. We can lack the skill set in decoding. If this was helpful, please let us know. If you have more questions you would like us to answer, please leave.
Yeah, that was an excellent question that brings up the devil's in the details with this. And your job is to be a forensic analysis person to find out where the heck the problem is existing.
And the whole reason we want to do this is we're tired of only certain people getting access to our expertise. So please send us your questions. We'd love to tackle them.
I'll take them.
Thanks.
Thanks.